Good morning and welcome to the Planning for Net Zero Energy Buildings briefing and presentation of the proposed performance standards. My name is Jen Geis. I'm an Associate Director with Cred Consulting and I have the pleasure of being your MC this morning. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners on the lands on which we are all meeting this morning and pay my personal respects to elders past and present and warmly welcome any Aboriginal people joining us this morning. The performance standards that will be presented to you today are the culmination of 3 years of research and engagement and are an important milestone in moving towards net zero emissions across Greater Sydney. We are thrilled you're here with us for the performance pathways being presented publicly for the first time. Participants are going to be muted today and video will be off. This morning, we're going to hear from a number of speakers who will provide their perspectives on the importance of this project, including the Minister for Planning and Public Spaces, the Honourable Rob Stokes MP. You're going to see some of the presenters in studio here with me today. We're live. We'll also have some who will live stream in and a few who've been generous enough to pre-record their messages for us today. This is truly a post-COVID event. Let's begin. Since 2004, the Lord Mayor of Sydney, Clover Moore's commitment to action on sustainability issues for Sydney is unmatched. We are thrilled that the Lord Mayor was able to send us a message of welcome to commence the session this morning.
Thank you, Jen, and hello everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I'd like to first of all acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation and pay my respects to the elders both past and present, and also acknowledge the people of the very many nations who live in our city. As we look towards our post-COVID recovery, it's essential to ensure that we make it a green recovery. Because whatever has changed during the pandemic, one imperative remains. We have to accelerate action to address global warming and adapt to a warming climate and build sustainable cities and sustainable economies. Working together towards a green-led recovery will help save our environment and benefit our economies and our communities. The city has set a target of net zero emissions by 2040. We are continually testing ways of achieving our goals and have identified our building stock, both residential and commercial, as a significant source of emissions and therefore as a potential ally in our efforts to create a more sustainable Sydney. City staff have been working as part of our Environmental Action Plan to 2021, researching performance targets and working with industry and government to outline planning pathways to meet the New South Wales Government's net zero emissions objective and the Greater Sydney Region Plan objective for a low-carbon city. Yes, I know that's a mouthful. The pathways you will hear outlined today cover new office buildings, multi-unit residential complexes, hotels, shopping centres and mixed-use developments in Greater Sydney. They also cover any major refurbishment of existing buildings, and they provide step changes that will improve building performance through energy efficiency and the use of on-site renewable energy and enable the use of off-site renewables through the planning system. The pathways were developed from a robust examination of the evidence, including a cost-benefit analysis for different types of buildings. We are offering the information for use by all councils across Greater Sydney in the hope that we can all work together and have a consistent approach towards a sustainable future. The pathways will support the post-COVID recovery as well as job creation in regional areas. The city's investment in 100% renewable electricity is supporting jobs on wind farms and solar farms in Glen Innes, Nowra and Wagga Wagga. It's also helping us reach our 2030 climate commitment of reducing emissions by 70% by 2030, 6 years early in 2024. And the government's announcement of its electricity infrastructure roadmap provides a very welcome boost for the regions, with renewable energy zones expected to provide 9,000 jobs and stimulate $32 billion worth of private investment by 2030 in regions like New England and the Central West. The climate challenge is one that we can only meet with a concerted action together, such as our Better Buildings Partnership and our Smart Green Apartments. I want to thank everyone who has worked with us, including our fabulous city staff, as well as our fabulous partners.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'm now very pleased to introduce the Minister for Planning and Public Spaces, the Honourable Rob Stokes MP, who kindly recorded this message for us.
The Lord Mayor, councillors and City of Sydney have been real leaders when it comes to building sustainability. Working with Sustainable Sydney 2030 and the Better Building Partnership, the city has really led a quiet revolution in terms of the performance of our city's buildings, with emissions from our city's built environment plummeting over recent years. The work of the city has led this quiet revolution that is an amazing example for councils right across New South Wales and indeed internationally to emulate. It's also a vision that we want to seize in the New South Wales Government toward our ambitious target of net zero emissions by 2050, a target that we will have to work globally to achieve if we are to address the human impacts of climate change. To do this, the biggest lever we have in the planning system is the design and place state environmental planning policy. This new policy is designed to integrate together all our design thinking when it comes to the built environment and public places throughout Sydney, our other metropolitan areas and cities and towns, the length and breadth of the state. That's why I'm really keen for you to engage with all your expertise in relation to the explanation of intended effects for the new design and place state environmental planning policy. It's really critical that we get this right. We want the rules to be as simple as possible and as clear as possible. We want it to be based on principles rather than regulation, and we want it to encourage innovative thinking and entrepreneurialism and inventiveness in relation to the built environment rather than just being a regulatory ticker box exercise. This is an incredible opportunity where we have to work together to increase the beauty of our environment, the efficiency of our built environment, and to do our bit to make sure that we tread as lightly as possible on the Earth's surface in such a way that we have a clean, inclusive environment that's safe, that's warm, that's prosperous, and that leaves future generations with the resources they need to meet their needs as well. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Minister. Our next presenter, Emma Hurd, is known to all of you, I'm sure. Emma is the Environment Commissioner with the Greater Sydney Commission. She's been the Chief Executive Officer at the Investor Group on Climate Change since 2015 and has worked in climate change, sustainability, public policy and finance for almost 20 years. It is my pleasure to welcome here in the studio Emma Hurd.
Thank you, and good morning, and thank you also to those opening comments from the Minister and from the Lord Mayor as well. Let me also start by acknowledging that I join you today from the lands of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and also pay my respects to the traditional owners of the lands from which you are joining us today for this morning's briefing. I would like to start by offering my congratulations on behalf of the Greater Sydney Commission to the City of Sydney and to all of the partners who've been involved in developing this outstanding piece of work. Performance standards like this are such a crucial part of the tools, the frameworks, the standards that we need to make the kind of progress that we absolutely know we have to make in order to achieve a net zero economy by 2050 or sooner and to mitigate the worst effects of climate change. Science tells us that we have to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees to avoid the worst effects of global warming. And that includes heat, it includes extreme weather conditions, it includes the kinds of bushfires that we saw just last year, as well as sea level rise and other kinds of horrifying effects of climate change. And despite a huge amount of work that's already underway across the community and the significant progress made by the built environment, we are currently not on track to meet the goal of limiting warming to 1.5 degrees. So we must accelerate the steps and the actions that we are taking if we are to actually meet the goals of the Paris Agreement, as well as the commitments that have been made by the New South Wales Government and the City of Sydney in terms of moving to net zero emissions by 2050 or sooner. Which is why it's also so important that government, industry and the community collaborate and come together in the development of shared principles and standards, such as the ones that we are launching today. As we know, and as we will learn further this morning, energy use in buildings is a significant contributor to greenhouse gas emissions across the Greater Sydney area. But it is also an area where we know that the business case and the environmental imperative are aligned. Reduced energy use and promoting greater energy efficiency delivers both cost savings and emission reductions. But we must scale up our response if we are to achieve the kinds of impacts and outcomes that we know we need to. Industry and government action on these performance standards will help meet our shared goal of achieving net zero emissions. And the performance standards also help deliver progress against the Greater Sydney Regional Plan, low carbon city objective, as well as the net zero targets that many companies have already set. So I would also encourage local councils across the Greater Sydney region to look at the performance standards and the evidence base that's set out here as a means of helping to achieve environmental targets for net zero emissions and sustainability actions in their local strategic planning statements. So this is an important opportunity to bring together energy efficiency, on-site renewables and off-site renewables to transition buildings to net zero across the Greater Sydney region. Setting step changes in performance standards for energy efficiency and integrating renewables provide industries the time we know they need to adapt, but also to innovate to achieve net zero. And it's also an important part of the work that we have underway at the Greater Sydney Commission in terms of looking at how we can turn the Greater Sydney region into a leader in the region in terms of our response to climate change and capitalising on the opportunities of the net zero emissions economy. So since the last Greater Sydney Regional Plan was developed a number of years ago, we've experienced significant challenges across the community, including through issues such as COVID-19 and also through bushfires and drought and other significant innovations and step changes in our community response to climate change. So it's critical that we actually look at the Greater Sydney Regional Plan and update it to actually reflect the changes that we've seen. So the Greater Sydney Commission will be updating and reviewing our Greater Sydney Regional Plan in 2 stages in the coming years. Stage 1, which will commence this year in mid-2021, is an urgent update which responds to new and emerging issues, including through the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. It looks to reflect some of the significant shifts we've seen since the last plan was released. Stage 2 is a full statutory review of the Greater Sydney Regional Plan and district plans, which will set out a refreshed 40-year vision and a revisited 20-year plan for Greater Sydney. This is required by law to occur by the end of 2023, but it will also draw on the insights of the work that we do this year and the 2021 census. This review and the update process is an opportunity to make sure that we have regional-wide strategic planning in place to support Greater Sydney's immediate COVID recovery and also to set out a longer-term vision for the region and a coordinated one government approach to Greater Sydney's future. And it will also build on the existing metropolis of the 3 cities model, which is a fundamental part of the Greater Sydney Regional Plan. 3 cities is central to how we see the growth trajectory for the Greater Sydney region, and also key to becoming a more livable, productive and sustainable city for all of us that live in it. Further information on the update and the review, as well as how the community, industry and all stakeholders can be involved, will be detailed in a short discussion paper we're releasing in the coming months. So let me conclude by again congratulating everyone involved in developing these new performance standards, which we're about to hear more about, and by encouraging all of us across industry, local government and the community to take a look at the work developed here and to examine how we can all take it forward in increasing energy efficiency and reducing the emissions of the built environment in the Greater Sydney region. Thanks very much.
Many thanks, Emma. Before we dive deep into the performance standards themselves, Ben Peachy, the Executive Manager of Strategic Planning and Urban Design at the City of Sydney, is going to provide us with some context and background to the project. He's in the studio today. Ben.
Thank you, Jen. Good morning, everyone. The City of Sydney now has a target for net zero emissions by 2040. The New South Wales Government and other councils have similar aspirations, as do many businesses and organisations in the development industry. Across Greater Sydney, the energy we use in buildings is a significant contributor to our emissions. Reducing the emissions of buildings is one way to contribute to our goals. At the start of this work, we asked ourselves, what is the long-term, collaborative and consistent path to realise the benefits of net zero in the planning system and to thereby lift the sustainability of Sydney and to make it a more resilient region? So the work we'll present today will help realise this opportunity for a consistent and planned transition for buildings using the planning system. The changing climate is a shared problem, and we share goals for net zero and greater resilience across government. This work aligns with the New South Wales Government's net zero plan and its action to provide a pathway to low emissions outcomes for buildings. It also answers the call of the Greater Sydney Region Plan and many council strategies across Sydney. So we're now also seeing this intent flow through to the New South Wales Government's design and place set with its net zero principles. And so we're presenting a way to put those principles into play. The planning system provides a framework for making step changes towards net zero buildings. We've looked at the common types of development across Greater Sydney and developed a strong evidence base that can be used by councils across Greater Sydney. It establishes performance standards for buildings over a certain size for the consistent and planned transition to net zero. To achieve our target, we've set step changes in building energy performance. These changes will enable the planned transition to better performance by signposting future improvements to the standards, allowing time for planning, adaptation, and innovation. So there are 2 steps. The first is planned to be implemented in 2023, with the performance standard able to be met through energy efficiency and on-site renewables. The second is planned for 2026, when the performance standard takes us to net zero with a combination of efficiency, on-site renewables, and off-site renewables. For each step, we've developed alternatives to demonstrate performance through either energy intensity targets, neighbours, or Green Star. And there are also a number of ways to secure the off-site renewables. This approach can unlock significant benefits. Investors, business and occupants across New South Wales can unlock about $1.3 billion in savings, with about $1.8 billion in savings to the New South Wales public, in addition to that from avoided costs in power, infrastructure, health and emissions. There are also benefits to the New South Wales renewables sector. With recent development data we have for the City of Sydney area alone, we're estimating that purchasing off-site renewables generates about $13 million for the renewable energy producers. We also expect to see the demand for skills in the energy efficiency sector, and buildings will become more resilient to a changing climate. So knowing that this is a shared opportunity, we've worked with industry and government to develop the performance standards. Stretching back to 2018, we've held multiple forums, working groups, meetings, and workshops to get your input. What we've heard over the course of the project has helped shape what we're presenting today, from the need for flexibility to the range of measures to demonstrate performance, to where we set the thresholds for development, to the balance of efficiency and renewables in meeting the targets. Most recently, we've adjusted the timing of the implementation to ensure the opportunity to plan and adapt. We've recognised where standards may be too challenging in practice and adjusted. And we've recognised that some classes have a different approach to development, which needs to be reasonably accommodated. So thank you for your time this morning, and we look forward to continuing our work with you on putting these performance standards in place. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Ben. Our next presentation is going to be delivered via video from quarantine in New Zealand, where Josh McClone is currently. Josh is a sustainability consultant with WSP Australia, with experience delivering Green Star projects, neighbours commitment agreements, and integrating ESD principles into commercial, hotel, residential, and public building developments across New South Wales and Australia. He has particular expertise and a passion for developing net zero energy carbon and water efficiency targets and undertaking life cycle assessments for the built environment. Josh has been integral to the project team and will present the proposed pathways to net zero energy buildings in planning controls this morning. Josh.
Thanks, Jen. So first of all, I want to run through the project methodology of how we reach these targets. So that we ran through like a 4-step process. First step was to select some suitable typologies for each of the assets that we're studying, or each of the assets of these targets. And these were representative of developments across Greater Sydney. So unlike the NCC, we didn't use geometric shapes, we actually used real existing developments to base our analysis on. And so from those developments, we selected a base case, which is either the NCC 2019 Section J or Basics Energy, and we went through modelling certain initiatives that would improve the energy of these developments and modelling what was economically viable, as well as the cost of each of them. And from there, that informed the standards and timeframes of those standards. So the first typology that we want to look at is the office typology. So that typology, we studied 3 asset classes there: B grade office, A grade office, and the premium grade office of different sizes. And then the targets that we came to was uplifted on the NC 2019, which is equivalent to 5.5 star neighbours energy. We got to about a 45 kilowatt hours per year per metre squared of gross floor area as the energy intensity target. So that's just an energy target across the whole area of the building. And it's equivalent to about a 5.5 star neighbours energy commitment agreement plus 25%. Or we've converted that into a Green Star target. And that's for the first step. So that was proven to be economically viable today. And then the second step, which we've developed on, is the same energy efficiency target, but including offsetting for renewables. So renewable energy procurement equivalent to net zero, or that 45 kilowatt hours per year per metre squared. And those are proven to be economically viable with the cost benefits that you can see on the screen now, including a marginal capex increase for both the first step and the sixth step targets. So to compare that to what's viable today and what has been done today, there are currently 14 office buildings of more than 1,000 metres squared in New South Wales that have achieved a 6-star neighbours energy rating today, and that's beyond the second step for this target, which is not currently the one we're asking for straight away. That's further down the line. One example is the 52 Goulburn Street in Sydney, which was developed by Brookfield Properties. So then the next typology that we looked at was shopping centre, and we essentially looked at a small shopping centre, medium shopping centre, and large shopping centre of various sizes. And from there, we were able to determine the targets based on an uplift from NCC 2019 to about a 4-star neighbours energy of 55 kilowatt hours per year per metre squared, or for the Green Star buildings, equivalent to the minimum expectation for the first step. And then for the second step, an improvement on that to about a 45 kilowatt hours per year per metre squared, or 5-star neighbours energy commitment agreement, as well as exceptional performance in Green Star, as well as the off-site equivalent to that energy intensity target of 45 kilowatt hours per metre squared. So those also had a positive return with minimal capex increase below 0.5% for the first step and around the 1% mark for the second step for the shopping centre. And some existing developments, so there's 19 existing shopping centres of more than 5,000 metres squared of GLAR in New South Wales that have achieved a 5-star neighbours energy rating, which is the second step that we're aiming with these targets. So one example is the Charter Hall development, 46 Wilson's Road in Lake Macquarie. And the other typology we looked at was the hotels. So we looked at a small 4-star hotel, a large 4-star hotel, and a 5-star hotel of various different sizes, as you can see on screen. And from these developments, our analysis, we're able to get the first step target of a 4-star neighbours energy commitment agreement, as well as the Green Star minimum expectation for energy use credit, and 245 kilowatt hours per year per metre squared of gross floor area. So one thing to mention that I forgot to mention earlier was that the office and shopping centres are based on the base building. So that's not taken into account the tenancy operations. So plug loads such as lighting and tenancy and computers and everything else connected, whereas the hotel and you'll see later the residential does include these tenant loads. So the loads that are in an apartment or in a hotel room. So these targets for the first and sixth step that you can see here, these also had a positive cost benefit, which we'll see. And the capex increase was relatively minor on these ones as well for both the first step and the second step, which includes off-site procurement of renewable energy. So existing hotel developments, there are currently 11 hotels with 100 rooms or more that have achieved a 4.5-star neighbours energy rating, which is the second step that we're looking at in these targets. And one of those is the 28 Albion Street, developed by Ridges. So we also looked at multi-unit residential typologies. We looked at a 9-storey residence, a 15-storey residence, and a 25-storey residence. And from there, we were able to put together targets within those height bands that we would recommend, that those basics targets that we'd recommend that we can target in order to achieve essentially net zero for the residential typologies. So we put together the first step targets, which is energy efficiency, and the second step, which also includes off-site renewable energy procurement equivalent to net zero for the different height bands. And those also came out at a positive cost benefit for the first step, achieving minimal capex increase of around the 0.5% and slightly higher in the second step, but still a very minimal capex and increase with very positive returns. So there are currently 21 multi-unit residential developments that are 6 stories or higher in New South Wales that have achieved the basics energy score above what the second target currently has required. One of them is 138 to 152 Victoria Road in Rozelle, which has achieved the basics energy 50 for development of 164 units. So one of the key parts of this target is looking at off-site measures and how to recognise them in planning. So through our analysis, we came across 3 different methods that we could essentially target in this planning. One of them is LGCs, green power, and entering into a power purchase agreement. So we're looking at, for these targets, having that be across 5 years as required by contract or entering into a PPA. Thanks.
Thanks, Josh. Our next presenter is the Executive Development Director with Lendlease, Neil Arkless. Neil has over 20 years' experience working in property development, project management and delivery across various large-scale use projects in Australia, the Middle East and the UK. Neil will share his thoughts about the performance standards pathways from the perspective of being a developer. Welcome, Neil.
Thank you, Jen. It's an honour for Lendlease to support the city in setting these ambitious performance standards. Social licence to operate has been an integral part of the Lendlease journey over our 60-year history. And now, more than ever today, our social licence has never been more important. Global awareness of the impacts of climate change, now more than ever our customers, our investors and our own people, our staff, expect us to be outperforming. Not only minimising their impact on the ecosystem, but places that positively contribute and restore our ecosystem. We've recently set our own pathway to net carbon zero by 2025 and absolute zero by 2040. So the pathways that are being discussed today are very aligned with our ambitions. Our experience of setting ambitious targets, you don't always have to have the answers on day one. I think this is really important to be thinking about today. It's actually about getting passionate, collaborative people to find ways to innovate and achieve ambitions as a journey. I'm confident the industry will rise to the challenge, and I encourage everybody to embrace the opportunity rather than fear the impacts on thinking of today. From a global lens, Sydney is considered one of the world's great cities. Days like today, for me, help us all make sure that this position is maintained and enhanced. As an executive at Lendlease and a board member of the Living Future Institute of Australia, I commend the City of Sydney on the work that's been done today and providing leadership in achieving this. And I look forward to doing my bit to contribute to the public and private sector working together over the next few years in this ambition. Thank you.
Thanks, Neil. We're going to hear from another developer perspective now. Our final presenter, Mariam Litkouyi, is Development Manager of Commercial Property at Stockland and has experience across real estate, investment and development. She's currently responsible for the delivery of Stockland's $450 million commercial precinct development in Macquarie Park, and is a past member of the Commercial Office Committee of the Property Council of Australia and a member of the Macquarie Park Innovation District Committee. It's my pleasure to welcome Mariam.
Thanks, Jen. I would also like to congratulate the City of Sydney for the incredible achievement to date. It is important to reflect on the current sustainability priorities and embed a fresh interpretation of our future-focused sustainability goals into the planning framework. Stockland's sustainability strategy proactively responds to significant emerging global and industry megatrends, market disruptions, including COVID-19, along with changing customer needs and expectations. These strategies can only be developed through proactive engagement with internal and external stakeholders. This is an illustration of Stockland's 2030 sustainability strategy framework. This strategy has 3 focus areas. Regenerative and circular living is where a lot of our time and my focus has been in the last few years. Climate action is a fundamental component of the delivery of the broader Stockland sustainability strategy. Meaningful carbon emission reductions and committing to a net zero carbon future will be one of the key measures of success within our strategy. This performance pathway supports our transition to achieve net zero carbon across our portfolio by 2030. Since 2016, the Stockland commercial property portfolio has reduced its carbon intensity by 65% by the end of last year, only through energy efficiency improvements. Over this time, Stockland was an early industry mover in the adoption of NABERS energy rating tool and has led an extensive program of major upgrades. For existing commercial property assets, that's including retail, logistics, and office, we have NABERS energy portfolio average of 5-star. This financial year alone, we are targeting 5% improvement in energy intensity and 10% improvement in carbon intensity across all assets. We're also accelerating the installation of solar rollout for our logistics portfolio by 2024. For future office developments outside the CBD, mainly suburban office, we target minimum 5-star Green Star building rating as minimum by meeting the compliance requirements for credit achievement in the positive category in Green Star centered on energy use and energy source. We have successfully raised the bar for our office development so far. M-Park development in Macquarie Park is now targeting 6-star Green Star and net zero carbon on completion. So Stockland Group, net zero carbon target, how are we thinking about net zero going forward? We are bringing our targets forward by 2 years. So we bring it forward to 2028. That's retirement living, logistics and corporate head offices. And we are expanding the commitment to include remaining asset classes, that's retail, workplace and residential. We ensure that we have a highly energy efficient, electrified and well-designed Green Star rated portfolio of assets, power from on-site and off-site renewable energy sources. This year we delivered further solar PV capacity across 3 logistic assets, including our largest logistic installation at Eunora Distribution Centre and 2 retail centres at Stockland Gladstone and Baringa in Queensland. In addition to the solar investment initiative, we're investigating an opportunity of installing solar across our logistics and retirement living assets with the objective of establishing an inter-asset energy trading platform to enable us to achieve our existing 2030 net zero commitment. The obligation exists to deliver solar across the logistics portfolio with the energy generated used to offset consumption in retirement living and corporate head offices. All remaining emissions formally offset through accredited Australian carbon offset program. Once all planned initiatives are delivered, there will remain a gap to achieve a net zero carbon target. This gap will be closed through the combined purchase of certified offsets with a recommended preference for Australian-sourced carbon offset programs and the purchase of green electricity. We believe that this planning pathway will scale and amplify positive environmental, economic and social impacts, creating meaningful shared value for all stakeholders. Thanks, Jen.
Thanks, Mariam. We now come to the part of the program where you have the opportunity to ask some of the project team questions about the project or the performance standards. So starting to my left, we have Ben Peachy, Executive Manager, Strategic Planning, Urban Design, City of Sydney. Ben leads the team to deliver planning controls and strategies that guide development in the City of Sydney and has directed this project. Next to Ben, we have Claire Donovan, Planning Program Manager, Sustainability, City of Sydney. Claire works in the Strategic Planning and Urban Design Unit at the City of Sydney and has led the project to develop the performance standards to net zero energy buildings. To my right, we have Tim Parker, Director, Sustainability Management, WSP. Tim has more than 25 years' experience consulting on energy, environmental and sustainability issues. His current focus is on supporting organisations and assets in their transition to net zero, and Tim has had oversight of the energy modelling for this project. Next to Tim, we have Matthew Clark, Director and Co-founder of Common Capital. Matthew is an expert in the design, development and implementation, evaluation of government policies and programs, and his role has been to lead the economic modelling. Online, we have Josh McLone, who you've heard from this morning, Sustainability Consultant, WSP Australia. Josh has particular expertise in developing net zero energy, carbon and water efficiency strategies for the built environment. And Josh has been the lead to establish the energy modelling for this project. Okay, to your questions. First up, does the project include industrial or warehouse buildings? There's been and will continue to be a boom in warehouse development. I might throw that over to the City of Sydney team.
We're not covering industrial as part of this project. We just looked at office, hotel, multi-unit residential and shopping centre. We definitely understand there's a lot of interest in industrial, so we're hoping maybe one of the other councils might pick that up and run with it.
Thanks, Claire. Next question. What size development does the performance standards apply to, and does it only apply to new buildings? I think that sounds like a question for you, Josh, if you're there.
So the size is different depending on the asset class that we're looking at. So for office, we're looking at 1,000 metres squared, which aligns with the commercial building program. And then for shopping centre, we're looking at about a 5,000 metres squared. And for hotels, we're looking at 100 rooms or more for those asset classes.
Great. And I was just going to add in, the reason we're looking at 100 or more rooms for hotels is because that also aligns with a new proposal for commercial building disclosure to cover hotels.
Great, thanks guys. Next question. Often developers expect increases in sustainability performance to be coupled with incentives. Does the project include incentives? I'm going to throw that one to you, Ben. Peachy?
Thanks, Jen. We're not proposing incentives at this stage. The way we've modelled the work is that these targets will be achievable and show a positive return. So provided there is the time for industry to adapt, we shouldn't need incentives. That said, further stretch targets or bringing something forward earlier than when some of those steps are planned to be put in place could be coupled with incentives.
Thanks, Ben. In an office building, would you count the lighting and HVAC that services the tenanted space? Josh, I'm going to throw that one to you, I think.
In an office building, no, as we're looking at base building, that would include the HVAC services, but not necessarily the lighting, as that would be under the tenants.
Okay, great. Thanks, Josh. Did the project look at precinct developments and the sharing of on-site renewables? I think I might go this way. Tim, I think that one might be for you.
Yeah, so it didn't look at precinct, it looked at individual buildings. But that's not to say where there is a precinct being developed of multiple buildings that you can't look at renewables in some of the early phases and using those credits on the latter phases of that development. It was focused on individual buildings because that's, I suppose, the precinct is made up of individual buildings. They're often built out over a period of time.
Great.
Jen, I might say it's probably something that we can look in how we structure the planning work, so where you do have those precinct or master planned areas that you can plan to deliver some of the renewables in the earlier stages, and they will assist with meeting the targets in the later stages of that development. It probably comes down to how we structure the planning controls.
Okay, thanks, Ben. How has the cost-benefit analysis been developed? Matt, that is one definitely for you.
So we built on the work that Josh presented earlier in terms of the energy modelling for the building. So a whole range of different potential energy efficiency improvements for all the different office typologies were developed. Josh and the team at WSP ran through models to understand exactly how much energy those initiatives would save. And costs were developed by W2 partnership as well. So we knew exactly how much those initiatives cost today in today's dollars and how much energy they saved in terms of megajoules of energy. Then we developed models to understand what that meant over the long run, over the life of the pathway, how those costs change between now and 2040, both the costs of the upgrades and the savings that you get from energy use altogether. And so the economic modelling effectively analysed which of those initiatives save the most energy at the lowest cost. And we worked iteratively with Josh to understand the packages of work that, as I say, not just individually the initiatives, but the packages that delivered the most energy savings for the least money, that were cost effective in the long term in looking at energy savings and those upfront costs, and then developed targets that, as you could see earlier, showed very strong economic returns for the investors themselves.
It might be worth expanding on the how we've actually come to the targets across for each asset class, because obviously there were the three different models or types of buildings, and then we've landed on one target. There was an iterative process between Matt and Josh to choose a relatively conservative target that could be achieved across all of those asset classes based on the work that Matt talked about.
I think it's also important that the projects were very practical projects today.
Yep.
It's not speculative as to what might be good in 5 years' time, what technologies might be coming in 5 years' time. So I think the whole program is very realistic around what can be achieved today, what are the technologies today, what are the renewable opportunities and costs today to make it real for everyone.
Certainly that sentiment was reiterated by our development presenters today.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I think what Ben was, I was also going to say, I think what Ben was alluding to as well is you would actually get a better cost benefit if you're designing it from scratch. Like these targets are based on existing developments. So if you design from scratch and consider passive design components as well, you will actually get a much better cost benefit result.
The modeling's all based on incremental improvements, based on an existing design and saying what bolt-on things could you do to achieve the target. Obviously, when you're designing a new building from scratch, you don't think, I've got design A and I need to bolt things on it to make it better. You think, how can I achieve the target holistically? So things like passive design are improving the overall design of the building, obviously come into play much earlier and can be very cost effective. Yeah. So our numbers are quite conservative in terms of achieving the target, probably at the highest cost, if you like.
Great. Thanks, everyone. Okay, the explanation of intended effect for the design and place SEP was released. How do you see this project aligning with that? I think that might go over to City of Sydney.
It was really great hearing Minister Stokes talk about the design and place SEP. We have had a number of discussions with Government Architect's Office about our performance standards and how we see them fitting in there. I think it'd be great to see our performance standards fitting in there and them actually creating a region for Greater Sydney. I think what we've shown today is cities have quite different typologies to the rest of New South Wales. We have more high-rise and we're likely to have more of that to respond to the Greater Sydney Region Plan requirements. So I think having performance standards for Greater Sydney would be fabulous. It'd be also really good to have different ways of being able to demonstrate compliance with the planning controls. I think at the moment, the way my reading of the design and place SEP, or the explanation of intended effect, is the use of neighbours and basics. The way we've approached this project is to give a range of options. So we have energy intensity target, although that still needs to be verified through the neighbours commitment agreement panel. So we make sure there's still a robust verification process. We use neighbours, and there's also Green Star Buildings. Is that the new name of the tool, if I'm getting that right? And when we met with a number of developers, when we showed them the draft performance standards, there was a lot of positive feedback about having options on how to achieve compliance rather than just having to use one option.
Next question. Could you confirm the geographic area the new building performance standards are proposed to apply? That is City of Sydney or New South Wales?
Initially, the City of Sydney will move this work through to Council and release the actual technical work and propose planning controls. The work itself has been prepared on the Greater Sydney, for the Greater Sydney region, so there's an opportunity to have it used throughout the region. And I guess there's individual councils can take it up for their council area, or government could take it up and, as we've just talked about, build it into the design and place SEP. So City of Sydney initially, but then opportunities throughout the Greater Sydney region.
Yeah, the evidence base can definitely be used by all councils, and the typologies were selected looking at ones that would be representative across Greater Sydney.
Great, thanks. For multi-unit residential building typologies, what key opportunities for energy efficiency improvement did the modelling demonstrate? Question for WSP, Tim and Josh.
Yes, it's probably Josh did the modelling, but certainly it was all the basics, the simple things like facade, appliances, those sorts of things. Josh, did you want to add more?
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. We looked at facade improvements, as I mentioned, not necessarily passive design, but adding on to the existing development, as well as HVAC improvements, looking at improvements from ceiling fans, specifically for residential, as well as lighting improvements. But all the detail will be released with the technical report, which will go through all the different initiatives that we have modelled.
Great, thank you, Josh. What have we got next? How does the project interact with basics, given there can't be competing requirements? That's a good question. I'm going to throw that over to you, Ben.
Yeah, that is a good question. So at this stage, we've developed the evidence base that we think could be used for improvements in the basics framework. So as the City of Sydney moves this forward, we know we can't set those higher targets unless we provide some incentives. And it probably goes back to that earlier question about incentives, that where there is that opportunity with residential development, we can find it in there. But I suppose we hope to be continuing our conversation with government and in amongst the draft design and place set, and so that this evidence could be used to improve basics.
And I was just going to add on, we have had a number of discussions with DPI already, and we've also brought them the feedback we've received from some of the developers, because a number of developers raised concerns that they would, well, not so much concerns, but they would like improvements made to the basics tool before looking at higher targets. And I think our projects also highlighted that you could have different targets for height bands above 6 stories. At the moment, you only have one target for 6 stories and above, and I think our project really highlights you could have a range of different targets from 6 stories and higher.
Great, thank you, Claire. Do the new requirements include an evaluation of embodied carbon? I might throw that one to New Zealand. Over to you, Josh.
Currently, at the moment, they do not include embodied carbon, but it's something that we've certainly talked about in a few of the different stakeholder engagement sessions. It's something we can look at for future kind of iterations of these pathways, but at the moment, no. It just includes the operational energy of these asset classes.
How has the cost-benefit analysis accounted for the different cost of development across Greater Sydney? That sounds like an economic question for you, Matt.
Yeah, so I'll answer this in 2 ways. One is that the different typologies that we used were representative of building types across Sydney. So we looked at small, medium and large buildings across each of the different asset classes. So they weren't typical just of the City of Sydney, but of broader Sydney. And the costs and benefits that we looked at were really incremental construction costs. So those costs don't change dramatically across Sydney. The cost of building a different sort of air conditioning system is pretty similar in the city as it is in Greater Sydney. All the cost and benefit analyses are done on a per square metre basis, so the differing sizes of developments within those broad classes of it's a small office building. A small office building might be something different in Penrith as it is to the City of Sydney, but per square metre those costs are very similar. So yeah, the cost benefit analysis takes into account those differences quite strongly. I should also mention that the energy modelling also covers a Western Sydney climate zone as well as a coastal climate zone. So the different energy consumption of buildings outside the city, as you get into Western Sydney, where it's a bit hotter in summer and cooler in winter, that's been factored into account with WSP's modelling.
Fantastic, thanks, Matt.
Which sort of comes back to what Ben was saying, was a conservative result was taken across all the different buildings within an asset class.
Thanks. For some heritage buildings, it'll be hard to achieve these standards. How will this be addressed? I think I'm going to give that one to you, Ben.
Yeah, that's a good question, and that's an issue we've heard through the conversations we've had in the preparation of this work. And so the planning controls that we're drafting at the moment will look to provide alternative pathways, still encouraging heritage buildings to aim for those standards we're setting, but recognising where there needs to be the balance of the heritage values and the impact of the fabric and the opportunities with heritage buildings amongst trying to achieve those targets. Yeah. So it will be built into the planning controls.
Thanks, Ben. A challenging balance. Can the panel describe what offsite renewable energy is recognised by the planning system and what would be the process for the procurement of this offsite energy? I think I'll start with City of Sydney. Claire, do you want to have a go at that one?
I think Josh outlined it briefly in his presentation, but you can either purchase and retire large-scale generation certificates or purchase green power certificates or enter into a power purchase agreement or use your existing power purchase agreement as long as it covers the 5-year period. So those are 3 methods, but with the first 2 methods, it would be working out a way you could purchase annually through a contract for the 5-year period. And it would be demonstrating that through either the power purchase agreement or the contract for the purchasing and retiring of large-scale generation certificates prior to OC.
Yep.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you. Next question. What measures did you consider for the energy modelling? Josh, that sounds like one for you.
So I think we briefly touched on this a little bit before, but yeah, we've looked at modelling, say, facade improvements, HVAC improvements, light improvements, as well as on-site renewable generation, such as PV, solar PV panels. It's important to reiterate here that the measures that we looked at were ones that could be implemented today, and so when these targets actually do get put forward, it will probably be a conservative, or there will be conservative what could be implemented later on once these targets are actually put into force.
Great, thanks, Josh. What could other councils do to adopt the same targets the city has set? Well, I think that's over to you, City of Sydney. Ben, Claire?
Well, we've been talking with councils throughout this work. We have been around to the Rocks and hosted forums with councils and brought them into workshops. So many of them are familiar with what we are doing, and as we actually release the reports, we're more than happy to sit down with councils that are interested and work through what this evidence base is and how they might be able to pick it up and use it within their planning frameworks. So I think there's a great opportunity there.
And can I just add, the report's written in a way that all councils will be able to literally lift it and add it with their council report when they go to council. So that technical report that Josh was speaking about, you know, they can add the project report as their evidence base when they want to take that to council. So it'll just be dependent on whether their, you know, council supports it or not. And there are also going to be draft controls in there as well, or options on how they can implement them through the planning system.
So last question. Has the modelling demonstrated improved resilience to global heating impacts such as urban heat and higher extreme temperature events? Modelling, I think that's over to WSP, yes? Josh?
So it hasn't necessarily specifically looked at what the additional heating loads might be in the future per se and all higher extreme temperature events. But certainly the more energy efficient a building is, the more it will be resilient to such stresses and strains as higher extreme temperatures. So in that way, we are kind of looking at, but we haven't specifically incorporated that into the modelling of the evidence base per se just yet.
I think the important element there is because it was a comparative approach. As long as we've used the same for the baseline model as the future of opportunities model, so there's no reason why it wouldn't be equally applicable from a cost change or a cost improvement perspective.
Really important.
And Jen, I might just say, I believe there's work happening in Western Sydney at the moment about the urban heat island effect and how buildings and the planning system can contribute to mitigating it or be more resilient to those events. So people are starting to think about it.
Yeah.
And it's something also that in the coming years, the City of Sydney is going to turn its mind to as well.
Fantastic. Thanks, Ben. Thank you to all of the panel and Josh overseas. That was wonderful. So from me and all of my colleagues with Cred Consulting, we're thrilled to partner with the City of Sydney on this really important project. Thank you for your time this morning. I'm going to hand over finally to Ben Peachy from the City of Sydney to close and provide you with the next steps on this project. Thanks, everyone. Ben.
Thanks, Jen. So before wrapping up, I'd like to thank our speakers this morning, Minister Stokes and the Lord Mayor, along with Emma from the GSC, Marianne from Stockland, and Neil from Lend-Lease. Thank you to all those who've contributed to this work, the project team from WSP and Common Capital, WT Partnership and Elton Consulting. The many experts across industry have given their time and experience and expertise to this. The project partners have supported and provided advice for it throughout, and the staff across the City of Sydney who've contributed to the work and all the engagement events we've hosted over the course of the project, as well as Jen and the Cred Consulting team who've assisted with this event. Lastly, I'd like to thank all of you for attending this morning. It's our pleasure to have you with us and be able to present this work to you. So our next steps will be to report this body of work to the Council in May with draft planning controls and then continuing on to a formal public exhibition if approved by Council. So we look forward to continuing this conversation and the important work with you. Thank you very much and enjoy your day.